Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, you'd like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at substack.com/@Jeremy. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. Okay, so my setup is a little bit out of sorts as I'm sort of in between studios yet again. But what I thought I would do today, let me see, just trying to give my Apple Pencil as much time to charge up as possible. But what I thought I would do is continue with some character designs for the new comic book that I'm working on. So let's see here. Just shared the screen. This is one of those times when I was like, I thought I had everything completely set up, and then not quite. But that happens sometimes. Okay, here we go. So just let out and then back in again. Yeah, so I've basically done like a couple of sketches of the character where I actually did like the way she looked, but I don't really have expressions worked out for her. So I thought this would be a good time to just sit down, just do a variety of just heads, different angles, different expressions, just try to get a better sense of the character. So let's see here. Hopefully my stylus has enough of a charge that we'll make it through this session. Let's see here. Oh, and my handy dandy drawing glove. Let's see here. I like how I wanted to have an expression of her smiling, and if anything, she looks more like the crow to me. It looks sort of a creepy, malevolent smile as opposed to a pleasant one. So still got to work on that. So I'm using a brush that's a little bit thicker than you would normally think to use for something like character sketching, but the intention behind that is trying to reduce my dependence on detail and trying to really boil this character down to large, simple shapes. And I apologize for all of the sniffling. Those who've been with me for a while know that that allergies are a constant struggle for me. I realize I don't need necessarily to have my normal mic with the mute button. I can just mute myself from here. So I'm gonna go blow my nose real quick. Okay. I just saw my studio door sort of crack open, almost like a creepy horror movie way. It was going, It's one of the cats forcing her way in here. Pull this cat condo closer to me because I know she's going to start meowing and wanting attention while I'm drawing, because that is her MO. I was reading a John Paul Leon comic book, or have been for the past couple of days. I'm not done with it, but it's Creature of the Night by Kurt Busiek and John Paul Leon. And he is just fantastic at creating a very full range of visual expressions, facial expressions, with very, very minimal lines. And I mean, yes, he is a great artist, but I wanted to specifically study how he captures so much, like that aspect of his simplicity, how he captures so much with so little. He's another one of those guys that reminded me, I say in the past tense because we lost him a few years ago, but reminded me of Alex Toth in terms of like just being able to convey so much with so little. And it made me think, oh, hey, Herman's in the chat. Hey, what's going on, Herman? Good to see you. You know, it's a crazy time on a personal level. It's not stuff that I necessarily want to go into, but it's really just more of like family emergencies. You know, other than that, you know, getting by. I always try to stay positive, whether stuff is going well or going poorly. But yeah, you know, at least I was able to make a little time. I wanted to at least get another live stream in, because the way that things have been jumping around, I don't know if I'll be able to do one next Sunday. So I thought, in the midst of all this chaos, let me just get on here, draw for a little while, let you guys know that I'm still here, still working, still making stuff. Although, to be honest, this drawing I'm doing right now is the first personal work I've had time to touch in 2 weeks. So it is a little bit challenging to be so pulled away from my personal art practice, because I make such a big deal about, you know, figure drawing on the regular, you know, working on a comic or a personal project or illustration on the regular. and to be in a spot where I'm pulled necessarily away from those things. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I had to laugh. Paul's in the chat. Paul said, chaos? What chaos? Well, I'm not talking about the chaos of the world. I'm talking about more personal levels of chaos. But even those, everyone's got shit going on. I ain't special. And HJ in the chat, HJ Mars says, hey, Jeremy, long time no see. Haven't joined the stream in a while. Hope all is well. Well, as we said, not having time, having other things that require my family's attention has forced me to step away from doing much personal art lately, having to skip some live streams. So that's not great, but that is also real life. And I think, having to figure out how to navigate those times when you can't show up for your personal creative practice. That's part of being an artist too, is, figuring out how to deal when you can't use art as your comfort blanket, I think part of that is having for me personally, it's having a strong partner that I can really rely on. And we've really just been kind of sinking into each other's arms lately and just being like, oh God, let's just get through whatever's next. That has been tremendously valuable. And it doesn't necessarily have to be for other people. It doesn't necessarily have to be a spouse or a romantic partner. It can be friends, siblings, just anyone that has your back through good times and bad times, and being able to lean into each other in times when we're all going to have times when we're struggling, period. That is life. But I feel like every phase of life has something to teach us. I mean, I know I learn more and more every day. Let's hear. Paul says, it cracks me up. You always get the emphasis right on the way I'm typing. Well, you know what? I think that even when it comes to chat, maybe you're just naturally a great letterer. So you sequence your words just right, so it's very readable. I think that comes from you being a good writer, from me having read a lifetime of comics. Between the two, but we're getting each other. Let's see here. Yeah, James is in the chat. He says, I'm here now, just eating, so I will rejoin in a bit. Got to get some nourishment. I mean, hell, I was shoving a protein bar down my craw right before starting this, and I'm sipping some coffee, getting my first bit of caffeine in my system. And James says, ooh, some cool faces. Yeah, I have been making shamefully slow progress on my next comic. And so what I wanted to do is just work on expressions. And I thought, that at least I'm doing something that is related to the comic book, that will be useful, and that is helpful to me. It's useful, it's helpful, and it's something to show more of, like I say, sharing the process. Herman says, I feel you. Life is lifing. You could say that. He said, I slightly got over a bug that was running me down, but I was still going to work. So I haven't sketched in about 2.5 to 3 weeks. So just can't wait to work this last day. Let's see here. Dylan's in the chat, says hi to Jeremy and Herman and HJ and Paul. Good to see you, Dylan. Thanks for dropping by. Great to see you. Let's see here. And hey, Independent Doodle. That's actually a great handle. I like that. Thanks for dropping by and joining the chat. By the way, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Most weeks I live stream every Sunday. Service may vary over the next month due to life, as we were talking about earlier. But yeah, mostly I'm here working on either illustrations or comic books. And thank you. The portraits, I have a comic book that I am developing. And I wanted to just get some character sketches down. So these are just me trying to do some portraits of the main character in a couple of different expressions, different poses. I wanted to do her sleepy, happy, angry, go through the whole range. In fact, this one is supposed to be sleepy, and I'm realizing that if I really want her to feel sleepy, I should probably have her head nod down a little bit more. Paul says, I find producing art difficult when all the spokes on my wheels aren't steady. FYI, I started writing my fourth book, Slow and Steady Does It. Now, you see, that is very interesting. For me, I'm quite the opposite. Art tends to be my comfort zone. It tends to be the thing that when I am stressed out, when I'm anxious, when I'm having difficult times, usually sitting and drawing for hours is kind of my go-to. And what I find really challenging is when life events are preventing me from having the time to do any artwork. So that's been the real challenge now, and where really relying on my wife has been essential, is when I haven't been able to just sit and sketch for a couple of hours, or even like 10 or 15 minutes. Yeah. So as opposed to, I completely get that when you're distracted or stressed out, there's plenty of people who are like, I don't feel like making anything. For me, it tends to be the opposite. I'm like, I can't deal with the world. Let me just grab a pencil for a bit, or a stylus, or whatever. The only thing that I will say that counteracts that is I know myself well enough to know that when I draw, I tend to want to, it wakes my brain up, which is one of the reasons why I like it. It gives me endorphins. It energizes me, helps me get a little bit more focused. But if I only get to do it at sort of the end of the day, let's say it's like 9 o'clock and I've had a crazy day, and the only thing now I finally can sit down and draw for an hour or two. The problem is if I start drawing around 9 or 10, my brain will be up and alert until probably 11, or will be alert till midnight or 1, and then it makes it hard to get a good night's sleep. So then I have to choose, do I want to reconnect and recharge my batteries creatively at the expense of screwing myself the next day because I will be run down and sleepy? And lately I've been trying to choose not doing the art late at night because I want to make sure that I can function well the next day. But regardless of that, I've still been sleeping, when possible, sleeping later than I normally would. Sleeping until like on the weekends until 9 or 10, as opposed to getting up at around 8 o'clock. I mean, I should be getting up even earlier than that. But so I think I got a drowsy face in here pretty well. But when I started this sketch, I don't know how many of you guys were on here when I started this. I had started getting down and noodling kind of in here in the neck area. And the reason why I was noodling is because I was trying to get the sense of the body of someone who is sleepy and falling asleep, because she's a little bit too, rigid and upright. And the posture of a character says just as much about their internal state as their facial expression. So I was like, what does the body of someone sleepy look like? So to be honest, in fact, I'm going to put a little note here, because I love to leave myself breadcrumbs as an artist, because I will look at a sketch like weeks or months later and have no idea why I drew it or why I care. So I'm just making a note that her body is too upright. And I'm going to try doing this again, but I'm going to work from the body. Like, what does the body of someone who is falling asleep look like? Because these are all things that when I'm making the actual comic, they're going to play a role is it's not just getting that facial expression down, but making it so that when you look at the whole drawing, it feels like, oh, this person is fighting to stay awake. Let's see here. Scrolling back up. Oh, so HJ Mara says, have you got a log line for your next comic, or you can't share that yet? I think I do have a log line, but I'm keeping it under wraps for now. It'll be coming soon. I honestly was hoping, this has been a shit year for productivity. I wanted to have like at least a sketchbook or a rough ash can of the first issue for WonderCon this year. And I have my WonderCon table placement. I would tell you right now, but I can't remember off the top of my head, and I don't want to dig through my phone during the stream. But I'll post that on Facebook and YouTube in the community chats and all the internets. I'll post where my WonderCon table is very shortly. But yeah, the point being is that I have not gotten hardly all. I've been writing and rewriting the comic instead of getting any drawing done. So, but mind you, that's because I'm trying to write the whole series before drawing issue 1. If I wanted to just draw the first issue, I probably could have gotten that out this year. And I'm actually I struggle with that, because every time that I have moved forward with a series, when I didn't have the entire story, the writing for the entire series written out, I've regretted it. And you'd think as I get better as a writer, I'd eventually be able to go like, all right, well, I can just move forward and work around this. But each time I'm like, damn, if I had only just worked out the whole thing first. So this time I'm sticking with it, and it's making me take way longer. Let's see here. Dylan says, in terms of asking how he was going, says, could be better, Herman. I got a mild case of food poisoning. I made breakfast this morning. I think it might be the eggs. Oof. It said the ink for the expiration date was smudged, so I couldn't tell. Oh, no, I'm sorry to hear that. Food poisoning is horrible. Yeah, you got to watch out for them bad eggs. Literally. Let's see here. Yeah. He asked how Herman's doing. He said hanging by a thread, but grasping still, just making the best. Hope you're good, my guy. Yeah, I think everyone I know is going through stuff right now. Health stuff, physical stuff, work stuff, life stuff. I've been joking with everyone. I hope you kept the receipt for 2025, because that shit is like everybody. The hell of return. There needs to be a hell of returns on that thing. Gary says, "Afternoon, everyone. Good to see you as always, Gary. Thanks for popping in. Always good to see our good friend Gary Hodges, creator of Downstairs versus Mars Bots." Paul says, "Art is your R&R. That's interesting. For me, it's draining. We all have our plight, eh?" Now, see, that is interesting, because I can't imagine spending all of this time, putting all this energy into making, if it wasn't something that I genuinely enjoyed and found relaxing. Like, if this was really unpleasant for me, I'm like, I would go play guitar or write poetry or just read books instead of making books. The only reason why I spend as much time, in fact, this is a funny thing. I think about things like working for mainstream publishers, and the idea that, well, I mean, if I got a chance to draw Batman or Spider-Man, obviously I'd be an idiot to not jump at it. But for something like, let's say an indie publisher reached out to me and asked me to work on their new character, and they were going to pay me a page rate, and maybe it's not Marvel or DC page rates, which I hear can still also not be fantastic. But let's just say that it was something that would maybe less than what I currently make in my my freelance toy design work, but it would be a reasonable paycheck. Like, it would pay the bills. In fact, let's say it would be a great paycheck if I were fast enough to be monthly, which I'm currently not. But if I were fast enough to be a monthly artist, it would actually be like, oh, this is a reasonable, like, paid gig. the stress of making comics, it is so challenging. To your point, Paul, that yes, it is very difficult to do. The only reason why I really do it is because I'm making something that I love. So I think in terms of making comics, there are some artists for whom they're a hired gun, they're a hired pencil. You pay me, I draw what you want. Don't care. For me, because the amount of difficulty, I will say it's very difficult, but this isn't about how hard it is. Your thing was the Paul was you mentioning that the difference between art being a relaxer versus being something that is stressing. And yes, it is relaxing for me, but it's so hard to do that I only want to do it for myself. I don't really want to draw other people's books, Batman and Spider-Man aside. So what I'm trying to do here is literally say, all right. In fact, you know what? This is an interesting exercise for me. Now we're going off into this is how I break down problems. I'm erasing this whole thing I drew. What I'm trying to do here is say, all right, that figure below, simple, upright figure, head slightly tilted down. And what I'm trying to do is figure out what do I want to do to her body so that on just a very simple shape level, it reads as someone who is slumping over or falling asleep. What do I need to do to her body? So I'll come back to that in a sec. Let me pop back in and continue with the comments in the chat. Let's see here. Everyone's saying hi and catching up, which I love to see that. Like that in the time of streaming here, like it's also a little chance for everyone who knows each other from various YouTube channels. Just hey, how you doing? What's going on? It's kind of nice. It's kind of like a little water cooler moment to see that happening in the chat. So it warms the bowels of my heart. See, Herman says, yeah, Jeremy, I've also tried to find simple ways to draw character expressions. So by doing simple circles, faces, and references, I apply to the characters I create. It helps a little, good for animation. And Paul says, clearly those are the same person. Well done. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that it's the hair. She's got this unique, I'm trying to give her sort of like an Afro-Greek look where her hair, those curls that are coming down from her forehead, it's almost like she's got cornrows, not quite cornrows, but she's got braids that end in dreads in the back, then also having these thick braids that are coming down and framing her brow and wrapping to the side. And those are kind of like the main feature of her head. And I feel like if I can keep that consistent, then her, and I can draw that from different angles, she'll at least read as the character from different angles. Then we get into the thing of what I'm doing now, where I'm just trying to learn how to draw different facial expressions and different body postures and tones and that sort of thing. Let's see here. Yeah, Herman says, appreciate the concern, Dylan. Things will get better. Just today is pretty whack and feel better. Yeah, I hope that everybody feels better. I just want everyone to feel better. I just want the world to feel better. Dylan says, thank you, Jeremy. And it sucks. I got food poisoning in January from Burger King. It was not fun. This time it's just upsetting my stomach. I mean, I don't know if Alka-Seltzer will help, but Paul says, watch out for them bad eggs, said the mom of every girl I dated. Oh, man. Killing me, Paul. Jim says, Jeremy, hello, pal. Good to see you, Jim. Hello. I've been away for being away from the stream for just an extra week feels like a lifetime. It's like I'm lost without my tribe. Yeah, Dylan says at least At least it's 24 hours, Herman. It's almost over. Well, good. Hopefully, you'll be able to bring that in for a landing and have your tummy heal and feel better. Bananas are supposed to be really good for upset stomach. Herman says, it got so cold, and we had a couple of snow hits in Baltimore. So out there shoveling like a young bruh. Nobody said nope. It's been crazy. Oh, Body said nope. It's been crazy for everyone. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine living on the West Coast. I'm like, yeah, I can't imagine shoveling snow. But then again, I guess you also can't imagine your entire city catching on fire. So things are crazy everywhere. Paul says the Luhana-verse. And Jim says P2P. That's the exact voice I hear it in. I will refuse to hear Jim sing it in any other way. Yeah, HJMR says, I know what you guys mean about 2025. Feels like a very intense year so far. And Paul says, stay warm, Herman. James says, I'm not sure if you think much about background art, but I've been watching the 80s Ninja Turtles series here and there. And I've noticed the sewer backdrops in particular, since they almost have a CGI look at times. That must be due to what was used for colors and highlights, and also where the bricks add to the lived-in feel. Well, I do think about background art, but I try not to get too wrapped up in it, only because in comics, the speed that's needed to work is such that you can't really get too detailed. Like the level of detail that you would see in an art of a Pixar movie or a Disney animation or a DreamWorks animation, the level of background and environment design that comes in those is far more than I think what most creators have time to create in comics. Unless, for instance, if I were drawing Batman, obviously I would have to design my version of the Batcave. So I need to figure out how I'm going to render the Batcave based on all of the existing versions. I have to figure out my version of Wayne Manor, and probably the Gotham PD, like wherever Commissioner Gordon's office is, whichever precinct his office is in. Figuring out all of those things, recurring environments. That's the thing. If you've got recurring environments, those are the places where you really need to go hard in terms of communicating the environment. Otherwise, it's a matter of, to me, it's more a matter of finding reference so that whatever you're drawing on the fly can look realistic. If it's just a back alley, or in this case, mine's a Greek mythology story, then maybe just looking at some Greek ruins and some artistic recreations of different cities. Like, what did Athens look like in a recreation of what Athens may have looked like in 500 BC, that sort of thing. Being able to make something that will evoke the feeling of a well-studied or well-referenced piece, even if I'm just, it's almost like you look at reference and then you cartoon the reference. That's how I think of it. I know that I started, as I'm drawing here, I realize I'm trying to explain something that I haven't had completely thought out or worked out in my head, because I still don't even necessarily have a great approach to backgrounds beyond what I just said, which is find reference, cartoon the reference. Meaning I look at the reference, and instead of trying to duplicate it, I try to break it down into my own personal shape language, my own personal style of line work. Usually trying to work on minimization, trying to keep the detail to the minimum, because it is a background. It's not the foreground. It's not the star of the book. The only time the backgrounds I think are really the star of the books is, like, let's say with Cerebus, when you've got like an artist like Gerhard doing some incredibly rich environments, super detailed with these cartoony characters blocked in. with cartoony characters blocked into a highly detailed environment. That's something almost kind of like a Disney style approach. Yeah, this little sketch that I did right here does not feel like someone that is slumping down tired. So I'm just going to erase it. I'm going to try again. I just need to do a tired stick figure. This is what happened. This is one of those cases where I can talk and I can draw, or I can read comments from the chat and I can talk. But this is one of those where I have to look inside of my mind and really visualize, what does this feel like? So I'm going to get caught up on the chat a little bit, and then I'll keep sketching. But oh yeah, Paul says maybe move her shoulders up, like head slouching. That's one of the things I'm gonna try. I mean, part of it is that I would definitely want to. That's the interesting thing. Yes, it's the shoulders up, but what I need to do is have the sense of the shoulders are up because the head is coming down, not shoulders are up because they're pulling up. Because no one pulls their shoulders up when they're sleeping. That's like an active thing. So it's a matter of feeling what the body's doing and drawing. Like, I need to draw a sag. I need to let the whole body sag. And that's one of those things where I need to just kind of, I guess, scribble into it until I find how to move the parts the way I want. Herman says, who you telling, HJ? 2025 started off punching and kicking, saying stuff under its breath. So this year, folks, we're barely at the end of February. And Dylan says, I see the Greek influence, which Dylan of Magioi of Thessalo, I guess I can see that you have a great respect for Greek influence as well. Let's see here. Oh, James says, I've had a few food poisoning a few times. No fun. Yeah, I think I will tell you the worst food poisoning I ever had. This is so ridiculous because it sounds it's very first world problems. It's very bougie. It's a bougie ass story, and I'm going to put myself out there like that from the start. So I had taken a trip to Barcelona. I'd taken a trip to Spain and Paris, Spain and France, specifically Madrid, which I didn't get a chance to see any of them. Madrid is just where I flew into. Barcelona, and then Paris. And I remember on the last day of my day in Paris, there was like a street vendor that was selling these curry chicken paninis. And I thought, damn, I love me a curry chicken panini. That sounds delicious. And I've never had a problem ordering food from street vendors before. And it wasn't like I was in Morocco or some crazy shit. I figured Paris, I bought some crepes in front of the Notre Dame before it burned down. What could go wrong? So I had me and to be fair, the sandwich was delicious. But I had to take the train down to the airport, to Charles de Gaulle Airport, and my flight wasn't leaving until early the next like I don't know, it was like 4 or 5 a.m. the next morning, something ridiculous, where I had to sleep in the airport. And so I get to the airport about 11, and it settles in. And each time I have to get up to go to the bathroom, I've got to take my bags, drag them in with me. So I can't just leave them out there. Drag them in with me to the bathroom, go in, and let's just say stuff was coming out of both ends, and I had to get up and do that a couple of times. Then finally, I'm like, okay, it doesn't feel like anything's coming out of my body anymore. I get on the plane to fly to Madrid, and then from Madrid flying, back to the US. And that plane ride, I was nauseous the entire time. I was clammy and feverish to the point where, and I asked them, I had to ask the attendant to bring me a vomit bag. I didn't end up vomiting in it, but they did have to bring me one. And I guess at this point, I mean, this was all pre-pandemic, but I could tell the people who were sitting next to me were terrified. Like, is this guy like the outbreak monkey? Is this spreading some virus that's going to kill us all? And I was just like in my window seat, just curled like, ooh, and like all I could do is just have them bring me like some ginger ale every couple of hours, and I was just like clinging on, and basically it was like that. The whole plane ride back, like the plane ride down to Paris was short, but then the long plane ride from Madrid to United States, like I was just so horribly, like my stomach was twisted in knots, and it just sucked. And I've had food poisoning before, and I've had food poisoning after, but having food poisoning while you're on an international plane flight, do not recommend. 0 stars. Don't do it. Let's see here. HJ says, I know you haven't been able to make much comic art recently, but have you read any comics of late? Any Ultimate or Absolute comics? I have not read any of the Ultimate or Absolute, the new stuff, mainly because when it comes to new comics, I'm usually reading them through my library, and I don't think any of them have gotten to the point where they're collected in a trade. So right now I'm reading an older comic book. I want to say it was from the mid to early 2000s. I think I mentioned earlier in the stream, Creature of Night by Kurt Busiek and John Paul Leon. And it is a Batman comic. It's a spiritual successor to to Secret Identity, which is where Secret Identity is where it's a normal kid in a world where Superman exists as a comic book character. And it's more about that kid. I haven't read Secret Identity, so I'm just paraphrasing only from what I've seen. But it's one of those things where in a world where Superman is just a fictional character, how the main character, a kid, needs a Superman in his life, needs a hero. And I guess how he ends up becoming or somehow bringing something into life that is Superman-like in the world. In this story, but anyway, in Creature of Night, it's about a kid who reads Batman comics and his parents were murdered. And in that pain and anguish of losing his parents, he needs something that will try to punish the people that actually did the crime. And he somehow spiritually manifests this bat-like demon who is out and hunting and fighting criminals, and just sort of parallels his life. And instead of him and the bat creature being a secret identity, it's almost like he manifests, they commune, and they sort of work in tandem. It's a very interesting book. I'm less than halfway through it right now, but I'm really, really enjoying it. Let's see here. Dylan says, I'm taking some Tums and it's working a bit. Well, I hope that helps with the tummy. Paul says, Baltimore's been known to catch fire. Did not know that. I knew it was Chicago, but I mean, hey, that was cows. That was like, over 100 years ago. And he says, I've always enjoyed the backgrounds of My Little Pony. Not kidding. Maybe it was self-defense for having to endure the show, but they are good. I thought it was when you said My Little Pony, I actually wasn't even thinking of the cartoon. I was thinking of Tony Fleece. I've gotten to know him on the convention circuit. Super great guy. His comic Local Man is awesome. That he does with Tim Seeley, and he's got and also the books Stray and Feral are amazing. But for a while, Tony, I don't know if he still does any My Little Pony work, but he was an artist on My Little Pony for a while. And, when I think of My Little Pony, he's my touchstone now because I never watched the cartoon. But let's see here. Herman says, I've been studying Studio Ghibli backgrounds. Can't really translate the book, but I focus on the art. So I'll be using it to copy the work in my Rebel software. I like animation background art instead of ink for comic. And I definitely think that the Studio Ghibli stuff is some of the best work around in animation. I haven't spent a lot of time studying it only because, I've mentioned this before. I have so many art books that it's hard for me to keep going out and getting new new sources of inspiration and reference when I haven't spent enough time with with the ones I currently have. So this is kind of like what Paul was saying before about having the shoulders up. Like I was just trying to find like, yeah, she has to be pressed against a wall, but I was trying to find an angle or a position where it would feel like the body is sagging, and part of what it's sagging against is that wall. I know that I was originally starting with this with just being head studies, but now it's becoming an exercise in gesture and acting with the character's body posture, because I'm trying to find ways to make the character's body feel like, before I even draw a face, because that's the interesting thing. Let's say that I really sell what's happening with the body posture. Like you just look at their silhouette and you're like, oh, that's a person falling asleep. You've done so much heavy lifting with the body posture that for the face, you may only need like just a couple of lines for a face if the body says everything you needed to say. All right. And I want her chin to overlap her torso enough that's like head is down, like almost resting on the collarbone. Let's see here. Dylan says, I was watching an episode of the Flintstones this morning while eating breakfast, and Wilma was wearing a pink apron, and it disappeared for like 4 seconds. And Paul said, LOL, Dylan, was she naked? And he said, no, she was wearing her classic white dress. Oh, so she was wearing the dress and just the apron on top of it. I mean, come on. Old school animation, they were all that Hanna-Barbera stuff. They were running and gunning. And if an apron disappears for 4 frames, it's like, whatever. And Herman says, Dylan, yeah, Spider-Man in the 60s had many episodes with wrong colored hands or feet. Not as bad as the original X-Men from Fox Animation. And Dylan says, it's funny seeing the repeat backgrounds while they run, like their homes are a mile long with the same window and furniture. And back to my Paris story. Herman says, "Oh, you messed up there, Jeremy. Eating food from other countries. LOL, street vendors. You were asking for it." He said, "I will take my time with stuff like that." Well, I mean, okay, street vendors, yes. I will say that when it comes to traveling, eating the foods of other cultures and other countries that you've never been to before, that is one of the big joys of traveling. Like food to me is one of the biggest parts of a culture, getting a chance to taste them and try different things that you've never tried before. Now, mind you, some people refuse to eat sushi. My dad will not eat sushi. He's like, nah, raw fish, ain't messing with it. I felt the same way until I started eating sushi in college, and now it's like one of my favorite foods. And I can see how people who aren't necessarily culinarily adventurous would be really hesitant to try random foods. I would say that the street vendor thing is where I probably did myself. But in terms of just trying like a a chicken panini in Paris, hell. Well, I mean, panini seems it's more of a French food, or is a panini an Italian sandwich or a French sandwich? I can't remember. I want to say it's an Italian thing, but regardless, I mean, in the end, you're right. I did myself, but I'd say I did myself with the street vendor thing. So much, not so much as trying food while traveling, because that's the whole point. When you travel, you're supposed to try to eat weird shit. At least that's personal opinion. Let's see here. Another commenter on the chat says, "Shakes on a plane." That was exactly my ass. That's how I was feeling. Let's see here. Dylan says, yeah, Paul, the reason I'm rewatching it is because I was talking to my dad in January and mentioned that I think their cartoons were one of the great reasons why his generation boomers were so violent. Which, by the way, there's a great animation book called the Hanna-Barbera Treasury. And it literally is like, it has little envelopes in it with like storyboards drawn on cards, but it's a reproductions of storyboards from Scooby-Doo, Alex Toth. I mean, artists like Alex Toth, he's the only one I can think of from the Hanna-Barbera era, but there was a lot of artists from that era, and it's got like the storyboard, character designs. It's like a production journal for a lot of great comic books that came out of the Hanna-Barbera studio. Excellent book from that era. Paul says, Outbreak Monkey, LOL. And Dylan said, he said that the Flintstones wasn't violent. And I was like, sure, Dad. I know the show is violent. Well, I mean, violent in the way that in the Honeymooners, what's his face used to go bang zoom one of these days, Alice, regularly, threatening domestic violence to his wife was like what you did back in the 50s. That's just how people rolled. It was a generational thing. Let's see here. And Herman says, right, Dylan, Fred running a 1 mile home, running 1 mile home based on the backgrounds repeating. Let's see here. Paul says, LOL, Dylan, very good hypothesis. I would concur. And James says, I take it darks help create contrast. I've been looking at artwork with dark shadows, and maybe I'm misremembering. I've had teachers told me not to go too dark with the shadows when lighting in CGI. I could not speak to CGI lighting, never having done any real CGI and what rules that they have. I think that the problem with making any blanket rules is that there's always exceptions, and there's also people who make it their style to do the exact opposite of what the conventional rules are. And no, contrast does not necessarily have to be done with darks. Dark and light is the easiest way to do contrast, but you could very easily intentionally say, all right, you can make contrasts of, for instance, you can have contrasts of color where you do, let's say that here's a character. Let's say it's all warm lights. And you're doing, or let's say it's cool light and warm shadows. And I know that this is probably a lot more dramatic than what you're thinking. You're just asking sort of in general, like using strong shadows. That for me personally is a stylistic choice. But I think that it's worth going extreme with this little example to show how, even though it's a stylistic choice, there's still a lot of there's a lot of leeway there in terms of how you want to use that stylistic choice. So I tend to do really dark shadows, and I think that there's a lot of people who probably do it poorly. And someone would say, see, that's why you don't go with really strong, heavy darks and blacks. And then there's people who do it very, very well. And you're like, oh, see, it's just a rule. You don't need to follow that or not do that. It really comes down to how well you use the particular technique. Because, for instance, I might say, all right, I'm going to do all of this in really bright colors. Like, you might say, all right, I'm going to do all of my shadows really strong. Or you might also say, instead, let me just go to a blue that is a desaturated blue. So it's not even that much darker. But let's say it's desaturated, maybe a little bit lighter. So you can also do a contrast of saturation as opposed to move that a little bit closer. So if I were to come in here and fill like that, nope, that's not far enough away. So let's desaturate some more. Let's try this. That's enough that it at least stands out. Well, I think with something like this, I'd probably need that blue to be a lot brighter. So let's move the blue up a little bit more. Point being is that you can do contrast with saturation. You can do contrast. Value, light and dark is the easiest way. But you can do contrast with saturation. You can do contrast with just, so this is just staying in the blues versus you can do it with a whole different color. There's lots of different ways to do it. And I think if you look at animation production artwork, you'll see where a lot of animation artwork is, when you look at cell shaded artwork, you'll see that the line work is very, very open. And they don't use heavy blacks. So if you're interested in doing work with more open lines and not using heavy shadows, look at animation, for instance. If you're looking more for strong contrast, then maybe looking at manga, looking at traditional comics with black and white artwork, or looking at oil painting. So the choice of whether to use strong blacks or not is a aesthetic choice. It's not a one is wrong or the other. And it's really a matter of you knowing what it is that you want and what you aspire to. Like if there's a particular artist that you said, this is who I want my work to look like, look at them and see how they use blacks. And Jim says, when you design your characters, do you ever use actors or public figures as inspiration? I do. I haven't recently, although for this character, let me see if I have any in this folder. I grabbed some random photos of some just women that I found online that kind of had the vibe, the look, the attitude I was going for the character. But when I was originally designing her, let me see if I go back out here. Originally, I kind of designed her after Tessa Thompson. This is who originally I was thinking of for the character when I was designing her. So Tessa Thompson, Valkyrie from the Thor movies. I forget her character's name on Westworld, but she was fantastic in Westworld. I mean, she's done a ton of great movies. Amazing actress. That's what I was originally basing this character on. But over time, she has evolved into kind of her own person and her own look. So, by the way, we're at pretty much the top of the hour. So I'm going to get through the last couple of comments here, and then we're going to wrap it up. Let's see here. Dylan says, am I the only one who thinks Absolute Batman is a bad character design? Because what the fuck? Built like a brick and not in a good way. I think that those whip things that are coming out of his arms are weird. But that said, one, I haven't read the book, so I'm not going to judge a book before I haven't read it. Two, the whole point of them doing the Absolute line is to shake things up and do something that's different from what's I mean, when you've got like 8 different Batman comics a month and they're all the same Batman, I think there's room to take big swings. And I would err on the side of encouraging them to do something that's weird and different and might not land versus doing something that's just another bat. If you're going to do just another Batman book and do another one where it's a familiar bat design, I would just assume, like, why even bother? I mean, if anything, I'm not done with the Creature of Night book that I'm reading, but the Batman in that book is a cross between the Spectre and Batman Beyond in terms of his design. And I love it. And if anything, I would love to see that as an ongoing series. I'd like to see that as Absolute Batman, but that's just because I'm really enjoying it. Two, it's John Paul Leon. And I mean, hell, he could just draw Bruce Wayne eating cereal and I'd be like, give me a 24 issue run on that. Rest in peace. So this is the thing. I know that I sound like a comic book apologist, but I've never done a monthly comic book, and I've never done one for a mainstream publisher. Having written and drawn and published my own comics and put out a few graphic novels, I am very, very hesitant to judge any comic book harshly. Like whether it's something from the big two or whether it's an indie book, the amount of work and how difficult it is and how difficult it is for anything to come out as anything other than a train wreck is so hard that I am very, very forgiving of the shortcomings of any given book. So when I see that Absolute Batman, is it the design that I would choose if I were going to relaunch a new weird version of Batman, like an alternate universe Batman? It's not what I would do, but I don't judge it as, oh, it's bad. First off, I may read the actual series and be like, oh, this totally works. This makes sense within that world, and I dig it. But let's say that I do read it and I don't like it. My instinct is not, it is bad. If I read something and I don't like it, my instinct is, I'm not the target audience for it. Because there's somebody out there that likes it. And if the people out there that like it aren't as huge of an audience as Marvel or DC hopes, then the book's going to go away because the sales are going to be there. But if it's something that I don't like, but it ends up having a huge audience and going well, then it means that my tastes have just deviate from the mainstream of the audience. But the mandate for that book is to do something new and different. So I say go with God. All right. All right. Last couple of comments here. I'm going to try and burn through these and call it. Oh, violence in cartoons. Paul says, see Wile E. Coyote. and Herman says, at Dylan, no, straight trash looking that Batman. I don't know. I mean, I think that the axe on the chest, I think that's kind of dope. And if anything, his build is that of like Dark Knight Batman. And the only thing that's difficult about that is that you can't really have a secret identity when you're walking around looking like a WWE wrestler. It's hard to kind of like not be able to, you can't really blend in and have a secret identity like that. And HJ says, I think Absolute Wonder Woman looks great. I'll tell you, I think that all of those designs, they're interesting. I mean, I thought it was the Absolute Superman for me. I like his look, but he looked a little kind of emo. And if anything, I was like, given that Jonathan Kent, Superman and Lois Lane's son is a young Superman, I feel like it's almost like they're just like Jonathan Kent without a haircut. But again, haven't read it. not judging the books, but I don't want to judge the books based on not having read it. And HJ says, can't beat a lot of the Ultimate designs though. The Ultimate Wolverine, new Ultimate Wolverine looks fantastic. That I will agree. I saw that and I was like, ooh, I want to read it just to see what he looks like in the book, because that looks pretty badass. Dylan says the designer took rectangular prisms to the max. And Dylan also says, I kind of like Absolute Wonder Woman's design. And Dylan says, I haven't read any of these comics, but I've seen videos talking about them. See, this is the important thing. I'm telling you, we're judging these things based on articles and cover images. I don't think it's fair to judge any of these comic books without actually having read them. And I'm not saying you need to go out and spend the money on them. For me, I'm going to wait till they're available from my library and read them then. But I'm just saying, reserve your heart. I'm not saying you don't have a right to judge these books negatively. It's your opinion. You should voice it. But one, I'm very forgiving of most comics. And two, I don't talking trash about a book if I haven't read it. I'm like, that just feels unfair. HJ says, I haven't gotten into Absolute yet, but I'm loving Ultimate so far. Herman says, I figure once I get my Ghibli art style done, I can add an alpha art in Blender to make 3D backgrounds and 2D ones look and work on 2D animation. Quick way to make interactive comic animated movies. That sounds way above my head. Very complicated. I mean, I haven't even really messed with Blender, so I don't know how to use Blender, but it sounds like it's going to look dope. I'd be curious to hear more about your workflow and your process. We might have to have you on the stream at some point, Herman. Yeah, Dylan says Hanna-Barbera was a cheap company, so it makes sense. Let's see here. I'm skipping a couple of the comments so we can get to the end here. Let's see, Herman says, sushi, yes, love the Baltimore roll. Has crab meat in it. Yeah, well, crab meat's a good base for any roll. Herman says, wow, Jeremy, that was a rough situation. When you don't know when you're going to explode from the rooter to the tutor, no more food poisoning. Yes, that hopefully, yeah, that's one thing. No more food poisoning. Let's shy away from that. Dylan says, I'll have to check that book out. I found some Gold Key Hanna-Barbera comics on Etsy. And it says, I like the image of her head tilting up, looking at us with that smile. Looks intimidated and villainy. Let's see here. I'm skipping a couple more here. James says, okay, color contrast makes sense. You have a character wearing a black outfit and a colorful background. Amar says, hey, Jeremy, and everyone else here. We're just wrapping up, Amar. You got great timing. Paul says, yeah, that's rough. Let's see here. HJ says, good seeing you again, Jeremy. I'm disappointed I couldn't make it for very long. I miss watching these every Sunday evening. Hopefully see you next Sunday. Again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stream next Sunday, but that's what I want to get on today. I imagine that in March, we should be back to our regular schedule. Although, obviously, I'm going to miss it the weekend. I'm at WonderCon, which I will let you guys know ahead of time. But it is good to see you too, HJ. I definitely miss hanging out with you guys. And Ichigo Senpai says, hi, I'm back. Did you remember that I come here, told you you need to get better art? Let's see here. I made it in art school and I'm seeing progress. So I'm surprised and happy. I am happy that you are making progress with your art. And they said, your artwork looks amazing, by the way. Well, thank you. I'm very kind to hear that. And I'm glad you are making progress. Okay, guys, we're caught up on the stream here. And like I said, things have been crazy. I hope that all of you guys are handling your craziness well and getting along. I still didn't get into a proper napping pose here, but we'll get to that. You know, for all I know, we'll get back to here in 2 weeks, and I'll be working on this exact same sketch. But find whatever it is that gives you peace. If it's not art, do something to relieve the stress. Spend time with your loved ones. Tell them that you love them. Hang out with family. Find something that brings you joy. We're going to get through this. All right, guys. On that note, if you enjoy these live streams and would like to get additional live streams twice a month, usually twice a month, get on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to my inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at substack.com/Jeremy. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you're digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. All right, guys. On that note, like I said, I may have to skip next week, but then hopefully in March we'll be back to our regular schedule. That's it for now. Go be creative.